You are listening to the audio portion of the QB Power Hour webinar series. The QB Power Hour is a free biweekly webinar series for accounting professionals presented by Michelle Long and Dan DeLong, who are very passionate about the industry, QuickBooks, and apps that integrate with QuickBooks. You can find out all the details about the webinar series at qbpowerhour.com. So without further ado, here's Michelle and Dan.
Welcome everybody to another QB Power Hour. Today's topic is desktop data integrity and conversion to QuickBooks Online. We're very glad to have you all joining us today. My name is Michelle Long. I am a CPA and the owner of Long for Success. I've been a contract trainer for Intuit since 2007, author of 5 different books. You can check them out on Amazon if you're interested in any of those, including how to start a home-based bookkeeping business, those of you that might be new, and QuickBooks Practice Set, so you can check those out. There's the link to our Facebook group. We're almost at 10,000 members, so I'd love to have you guys join us on Facebook and continue the conversation. Dan?
Yeah, my name is Dan DeLong, owner of DanWith, where we transform businesses through technology, formerly of Intuit Technical Support. Was a trainer, writer there, proficient in all things in the QuickBooks ecosystem, and just signed on to do the technical editing for QBO for Dummies, the 6th edition, which will be, as soon as it's published, it'll be outdated. But it's still out there. And my new project is the Chief Content Creator at Schoolofbookkeeping.com. So some details about the upcoming QB Power Hour series. Of course, today we're going to be talking about desktop and data utilities that are in there and converting it to QuickBooks Online. And Michelle and I were kind of thinking, well, what do we do next? So we're actually going to have you help us in a poll question. What do you want to see in the QB Power Hour? We've got some ideas and we've got some things floating around for the rest of the year, but our schedule is kind of flexible. So we can give us, if you can give us some topics of things that you want to see in the QB Power Hour series, then definitely help us out, and we'll do our best to accommodate. The PDF of the slides is available there, as well as the recordings that you can watch later on Michelle's YouTube channel and the podcast, so you can listen to us on the go, or you can always go to qbpowerhour.com and look at the webinar archive and get all this this information as well. Just a little bit of the housekeeping. If you do have any questions as we go through what we're talking about here today, put it in the Q&A section rather than the chat. That way we can see it and address it and share that answer with us, because again, Michelle and I are flying solo today. We don't have our posse of helpers in the background. So yeah, just put any questions that you have as we go through this in the Q&A, and we can either address them live or answer them in the Q&A dashboard there as well. So our agenda today is we're going to talk about data damage, and mostly data damage is going to occur inside of QuickBooks Desktop. We're going to talk about the causes, some of the symptoms, and more importantly, the cure. How do you fix these data issues? And then we'll talk a little bit about optimizing your desktop performance, because the old adage of the larger they are, the harder they fall, or the larger your data file is, the slower it goes, especially when you're running reports and some of the things that you want to do on a regular basis will change the performance of working inside QuickBooks Desktop. And then, lastly, we'll talk about converting that desktop file to QBO. So if you're ready to make the transition, what would be some of the best practices there with converting the desktop file to QBO? So first, we'll start off with our first poll question. What version of QuickBooks are you using? So let me go ahead and launch that poll question.
And Dan, while they're doing the poll, I'll ask you this question. Somebody wants to know, why is QuickBooks only good for 2 years? After 2 years, I start having numerous problems.
It's not only good for 2 years, but it seems like that. Because technology is changing at a pretty rapid pace. It's almost like you're changing changing the tires on a moving vehicle. So when you have, desktops comes out, which is about to come out, 2021, historically comes out in September. So that's based off of the current, desktop configuration with your computers. 2 years from now, who knows what that's going to look like, the average computer, what it's going to be sold at, what web browsers are going to be, there by default, what version of those types of things. So, technology does change quite rapidly. So it may seem that way, that QuickBooks is only good for 2 years, but, they only do live support for, the current version plus 2 anyway. So it is hard to keep up with the times, so to speak. And that's why, it seems like, well, I just installed it. Now I'm being asked for a new version of QuickBooks already. So hopefully that kind of helps address some of the questions there. So let me go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So yeah, mostly both. So this is a good webinar for both, because we're talking about both desktop and QuickBooks Online.
And Dan, one of the other things that I was going to say is, they said, how come I'm having trouble after 2 years? Well, this could be causing some of the troubles here, some of these causes here that you're getting ready to talk about.
Yeah. So when we talk about data integrity problems, we're going to talk about, and we'll talk about some of the symptoms of what you'll experience inside of QuickBooks. But when I first started working at Intuit Data Services, there was actually a department inside of the support organization that talks about or that fixes data integrity problems. And back then, of course, desktop was the only version that would deal with this. But they actually had a map of the United States, and what they were trying to do is correlate data problems with weather. So they were actually tracking like tornadoes and hurricanes and thunderstorms, and trying to see if they could predict when data integrity problems would surface to their department. And what the correlation is that data integrity problems are mostly related to power issues or some kind of interruption between the program and the data. So this could be all sorts of issues of thunderstorms, of tornadoes, of anything that causes the power to go out while you're in QuickBooks. That could be a network interruption. Somebody kicks the power cord to your router. All sorts of things that can involve a human, as well as just those power types of issues. You hard boot. Your computer locks up, and you have QuickBooks now severing its connection with the company file, and that can cause data integrity problems. And the adage of larger files will be more likely to have data integrity problems. Dan, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say one thing I might add on this is, so many of our clients, because desktop has been around forever, like 25, 30 years or something. So a lot of these clients have been using QuickBooks for a long time, and many versions of QuickBooks and stuff. And so it's more likely that they do have some data integrity problems versus not having any problems. So this is a good thing for you all to learn, and you can help your clients by doing a data file checkup for them,
Right.
and help with some of these things, because all of this stuff over the years, it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of like termites. Either your house has termites or is going to have termites.
Question of when and
right,
how bad.
And like lightning, you really don't know where it's going to strike or what's going to happen when it actually does happen. So let's talk a little bit about QBO and data integrity. So with QuickBooks Online, your company data is redundantly backed up. And what that means is that as soon as you save your data, wherever it's actually being stored in the cloud, it's automatically backed up somewhere else. And, when we think about the cloud, there's not this nebulous computer floating over top of, the United States somewhere. It's actually somebody else's computer, right? But those are stored in safe areas, so they're impervious, at least that's what they would like you to think, right? They're impervious to weather related issues when it comes to, power outages. And even if something were to happen, like an earthquake, swallows up wherever wherever your company file is located in the cloud, it's redundantly backed up somewhere else. So if both of those, or if those multiple locations happen to go down, there's bigger issues in the world with what's going on, more than your QuickBooks company file. So there's very little company-wide damage of things that you would see when we talk about what data damage can affect inside of QuickBooks, and power interruptions aren't going to affect the data. So when you're in QuickBooks Online and your power goes out or your internet goes out, that doesn't affect the data, only saved data. Now, issues are going to happen. QuickBooks Online is not perfect, and before we have an influx of, well, wait a minute. But yeah, things do happen, but it's not company wide in that particular company. You may have some issues that you need to merge items or things like that inside of QuickBooks Online, but it's very little what we would see in desktop. So first thing to do to check and look at your company file inside of QuickBooks is the product information screen. And that is a keyboard shortcut of either the F2 key on your keyboard or Control 1. Either one will do the same thing. So here's what you're going to, there's a host of information as far as what you can see in the product information, like the QuickBooks license number, product number, the number of licenses, what version you're on, that little, I don't know if you can make it out, but underneath where it says activated, it's got R7, so that tells you what release you're on, because oftentimes that's going to be the first step, especially if you call support. It's like, oh, are you updated to the latest release? So that's going to tell you there. But with regards to the file, it's going to tell you where it's located, the size, and we're going to talk about what targets and why that's important for converting to QuickBooks Online, as well as database file fragments. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here. So looking at this screenshot, there's a DB file fragments of 6. So you want that typically to be below 50. And then it also gives you an option to review data errors. So later versions of QuickBooks Desktop give you the easy access to the log file when you do run some of these utilities. Michelle, were you going to add?
Well, I was just going to say, right to the right of that, where it says versions used on file. Mm-hmm. That's where, this one there's only one, but that's where if you've had a client that's been using QuickBooks for a number of years, you will see how many versions of QuickBooks they've been using. Like if they started using it back in 2000 and then they went to 2003 and 2006, you can see all the versions of QuickBooks that they've had that company file out there. So that can also usually give you an indication, of how old it is, in addition to the file size and the DB fragments and things like that. Mm-hmm. That's kind of helpful too.
And you can also see when some of these utilities were actually run on what day. So if there was a rebuild that needed to be done, that'll be entered in the versions used on file as well. Good call out there.
Can I just add one more thing? I'm sorry. Sure. If you want to go back up just real quick, just one more thing. The other thing that's helpful is, I know I used to have people who said, Intuit told my client they have to upgrade the enterprise because they're hitting some of their list limits. Over on the right side there, you see the list information, the total accounts, the names, customers, vendors, and things like that. If they are approaching the list limits, which can happen if they've been using QuickBooks for 20 years, they may be doing that. Later, Dan and I are going to talk about the condense feature that can help you reduce the number of customers and vendors and things like that. So that's where, though, you can kind of monitor the list limits and if they're approaching that. Sorry, Dan.
No, that's a good call out as well. Yes. So, I mean, there's a lot of information here, and this also can bring you into, like if you press Control 2 or F3, you actually get into a whole new world of things that you can look in
That's
in
a
there.
scary
So,
world. That's too techie for me.
so we just want to bring you to the door here, not take you see what's behind the curtain. So some of the signs of data integrity problems are missing names on the list. So I had a customer and it's not there, or I look at an invoice and it doesn't have that customer's name on the transaction anymore. Your balance sheet is out of balance. Right now, QuickBooks Desktop will actually tell you when it's out of balance, but sometimes people don't even bother to look and see if their balance sheet actually is in balance when they run that report. But now it'll tell you, it seems like your balance sheet is out of balance, which is false advertising, right? The balance sheet should be in balance. You know, your assets should equal your liabilities and equity, but oftentimes that report is too big to actually see and compare those two numbers. Michelle?
So I was just going to say, Dan, this is where I have a story. So years ago, this was before we had remote access and stuff. I had a client who called and said their balance sheet was out of balance. I'm like, no way. That's impossible. You can't make a one-sided journal entry in QuickBooks. There's no way. So I'm like, I'll come out and take a look, see what's going on. I got out there and I was like, well, it's out of balance. I couldn't believe it. But because I was a ProAdvisor, I got out my phone and I called my little tech support number. And I'm like, hey, this balance sheet's out of balance. And I found out that is a very common problem with QuickBooks Desktop. And actually, it was always like the customer care or tech support. It was always one of the top 10 calls was the balance sheet out of balance. So it is something that happens frequently, and they can identify. Usually it's this, or this, to help you to fix it. But I was shocked the first time I found a balance sheet out of balance.
Yeah, I mean, when you actually do see that, then it's like, oh, and then the process of actually narrowing it down is actually pretty straightforward once you actually get the idea of okay, well, how do I fix this manually if the data utilities don't do that for you, because that's first thing to do. But some of the other things, as far as anytime you say the word "that's weird" and QuickBooks in the same sentence, that just things aren't working as expected, because like lightning, as we talk about lightning, we don't know where things are gonna show up, and so when you it was working, now it's not, and now you say the word weird in the same sentence as QuickBooks. That's where data damage might be the prime suspect. And then a high number of DB fragments, when you look at that in your product information window, and you see a high number there. So above 50 is where you would see. Now, what's a database file fragment, right? So this is where we're talking about, the hard drive itself, and most hard drives are circular, unless you have like a solid state drive, but most of them are circular, like a record player, and then they read or write information to that hard drive from the center out. And obviously you're doing other things on your computer other than QuickBooks, so that hard drive is going to write a little bit of QuickBooks, a little bit of your Excel spreadsheet, a little bit of your Word document, a little bit of your, whatever it is that you're working in on your computer and saving. So you may have a piece of QuickBooks interrupted on the hard drive by other things that you're saving on your computer. So then you go back into QuickBooks, and then QuickBooks will then start writing again. So now you have two file fragments, or you've deleted something on your hard drive, and the hard drive then goes back and fills in that gap. So then now we've got two or more file fragments of that QuickBooks QBW company file. So as you continue to use QuickBooks, and if you're doing multiple companies, you could have a lot of database file fragments. So when you're running a report, like a balance sheet, your computer or QuickBooks now has to consolidate all of those file fragments together, because it has to look at every transaction that's in your QuickBooks file in order to get a nice clean balance sheet that's in balance. And if there is a high number of that, I mean, it's really just like juggling, right? I mean, if you've got 50 file fragments up in the air, it's the likelihood of something falling is certainly pretty high. So that's where those database file fragments, you want to keep them below a certain number. 50 would be pretty high. Michelle?
Right. Well, I was just going to add something and then ask a question for someone. So on the missing names on the list too, another sign of that is when you go, like, let's say Dan, I'm going to invoice Dan with. And so I go to invoice Dan with, and it says the name's not found. But then if I go try to add him, or I know he's there, that's where you'll have a problem. If you try to add them, it'll tell you they already exist, but yet when you try to type in the name, it won't find them. So that's some of the missing names too. And if I remember right, it seemed like it was always your customers that would go missing more so than the vendors. I wasn't sure why that was, but you know,
just get used more often.
You lose my vendors and the bills I owe. Don't lose my customers.
Get that money out of here.
Yeah. So again, like Dan said, just, you know, if I'm trying to do the invoice and it doesn't find the customer, like he says, that's weird. I know Dan's my customer and he should be there. So, you know, that's just a good example of the that's weird thing. And then Kim had a question. If customers are not in alpha order on the collection report, but they are in order in the customer center, is this a sign of data issues?
I wouldn't say yes, because reports can be sorted in certain ways more so than the list itself. But some reports are based on how the list is sorted. So like your profit and loss, for example, that's always going to show up based on how the list is physically sorted in the chart of accounts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure 100% if that collection report is pulling from that, but it doesn't hurt to resort the list to, you know, every once in a while, which is something that we're going to talk about. I think maybe on the next slide. No. Yeah. So when you've come across something where you do see some data integrity problems, you know, how do you go about and address that? Well, first step, of course, is to make sure that you're updated to the latest release, and you can check that on the through the product information window, and then you can also go to, you know, QuickBooks.com and look for the update, and it'll tell you what the latest version is, and you can compare that to what you see in the product information window, and or you can just do an update and see if anything new gets downloaded. Restarting QuickBooks is a good idea because there's a log file that's created every time that you restart your QuickBooks. If you do need to go into that log file to see what actual transactions are being impacted by the data damage, you want fresh snow here. We don't want to necessarily be looking through you know, a week's worth of interactions in your QuickBooks company file. You just want to get to what is currently causing the problem. And then there's basic data damage steps or processes or tools. So resorting the lists is one major thing to do that, because if you have lists that you've been, you know, modifying, adding, deleting, you know, putting in different sorts inside of QuickBooks, putting it back to its default sort. Order. There we go. I was trying to figure that word out and it wasn't coming out. Putting it back to its default order is a good idea, just to make sure that the list damage isn't there isn't any list damage to cause that damage later, because your lists are used on every transaction. So if you have some list damage, often just resorting that list will take care of that, and then you won't have that weird situation again.
And
creating
Dan,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that usually fixes the missing customers that you might have in that situation. But if I remember right, Dan, you can resort each list individually. Like I could just resort my customers and not my vendors. But if you go to the payee name, like let's say on a check, if I remember right, Dan, couldn't you do Control L and resort all lists at one time?
Yes. Yeah, customers, vendors, employees, and other names are all part of the master name list
Yes, that's what it
inside of
was.
QuickBooks. And so there is no option to look at them all, from the list drop down inside of QuickBooks. So yes, you can either go to a journal entry, put your cursor in the name field, or a check and put your cursor in the pay to the order of field, because you can write a check to anyone.
Right.
So that's the way that you can access that names list and sort all and resort all of the lists all at one time. And that's just for the names. So you still need to do your
accounts or
your
items.
accounts, and accounts, items, and names are the heavy hitters. There's other lists that you can resort, like the customer message list and those types of things, but typically those aren't going to feed into causing all those. But you could go through and do that. But mostly your customers, your chart, or your names, your chart of accounts, and your items are the main lists that you want. So any list that you're looking at, if you're on the customer list, if you go to the view menu, there'll be an option there to resort the list. It'll put it back in its default order. And then creating and restoring a portable company file. This is often one of those steps that is often overlooked, but it actually has a really good result. Because when you create a portable company, what it does is it consolidates. In order to make it portable, it needs to make it as small and compact as possible. So when it creates a portable company file, it can basically re-indexes the company file. And I used to always tell people it's like sifting flour, right? I mean, some recipes call for sifting flour, some don't. But when you sift your flour, it puts everything in a nice orderly fashion, so that when you restore that, it is looking at a file that to restore that is, again, it's fresh snow again. So more so than making a backup file, because that backup is there's a lot more information in there, and sometimes the empty spaces, like if you've deleted transactions or customers or vendors, those holes are still there. So the portable file is going to consolidate all of that, and then restoring that will put it back. And you don't want to overwrite your current company file. You want to restore that in another location, so that you can compare if it has the same problem as your other company file did or does. So balance sheet out of balance, again, it's as Michelle was saying, it is fairly common. But first, running your basic data tools is a good idea. So running your verify. So from the file menu under utilities is verify data. You want to see if it detects anything that is damaging the file, and then if it does, it will prompt you to run a rebuild and run the rebuild rebuild utility, and then you want to check it by doing another verify, because now with desktop, when you do a rebuild, it does a verify and a rebuild at the same time. And when you look at those tools inside, or you look at the log file, it shows both, and that sometimes that can become confusing. So I just like to run the verify, run the rebuild, and then run another verify right after that to see, okay, what's the current state of QuickBooks. And then if you do, you need to look to the QB, it's actually not, QBwin.log file, which will list all of the results of that last verify, and it'll be broken into sections, and you can see if there are there's a notation in there called LVL_error. You can search for that and look for what is that problem, and there's tons of resources available on QuickBooks.com to walk you through what it is that you need to do, because it's going to go ahead.
No, I was going to say, in addition to the resources, don't forget that as a ProAdvisor, we have support. So we can contact support when you run into problems that you can't fix and stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, and so and then there's ways to, because sometimes there are transactions that you can't fix, and then you have to either delete them or or re-enter them. But you got to identify what those transactions are. The QB win log is going to help you identify those, or there are ways to run the balance sheet by month, by day, find the first day, and then those other reports and transactions that you can to identify what the problem transaction is, and then typically it's deleting and re-entering that transaction to put it back in. But then you have the host of other problems of, was that a reconciled transaction? Do I need to redo the reconciliation in order to do that? So, just don't willy-nilly delete a transaction without, taking those other steps.
And Dan, somebody's asking how to run the QB win log. Didn't you say that's now in the product info window, or do you have to do the F2, F3?
Yeah. So the last time that you did that, a verify or a rebuild, that is available in the, there's a button, you can go back to that here, it'll show. So on the product information window down at the bottom, there's a review last verify / rebuild, and that will show, right there on the screen so that you can see, and it takes a lot of that notepad word garbage, gibberish is unless you've looked at it before, it's like, taking apart your transmission. Listen, you got to know what you're doing. But it is just a log file, so it's not something that you can terribly, it won't damage your file if you do anything horribly wrong, like delete it, because it gets recreated when you close and reopen QuickBooks anyway. But you can access that. It'll give you the error message and those types of things. So then you can go out and find a support article to see, what do I need to do to fix that? In addition to that, so sometimes the data damage is so bad you can't even open the company file. So you can't run any of these utilities when you're in the company file in order to get to that. So there are other file utilities that are out there, and I think QuickBooks is now, or Intuit is actually making like a one tool to kind of rule them all type of thing that will do all of these things. But there is a QuickBooks File Doctor, which will do the rebuild outside of the company file without actually getting into the company file itself. And then there's a component repair tool and a clean install utility and an install diagnostic tool. But again, all of those tools are now being consolidated into one, so that you can just run that utility, choose what option that you want, and then it'll run that utility for it. So running the File Doctor will do just that. It will run the verify and rebuild and tell you whether you can fix that, whether it can fix the file. So if, okay, worst case scenario, the File Doctor failed, you can't even get into the company file, and the File Doctor, what do you do at that point? Because you are a ProAdvisor, as long as you have the desktop, ProAdvisor membership, you have support with Intuit to be able to send that file to data services, and they have a lot more utilities where they can run those utilities on the file to see if they can put Humpty Dumpty back together again for you. And you may be asked to send multiple files, not just the backup, but also the appropriate other files, like a TLG file, that is associated with your QuickBooks company file, and send those things there. I had that happen probably last month. There were two. It was a server crash. Here we are. Data
Causes.
data causes the server crashed. Then they tried to bring up restore the files. There were two files out of all of their clients' files that they couldn't get into. I tried everything to get into those, and we ended up sending them to data services. They were able to put one together so that you could get into it, but the other one was so damaged. Unfortunately, it's the last resort is restoring a previous backup. So that is another another thing to think about is, what is your data backup regimen? So worst case scenario, if I did have to go back to that previous, how much data would I actually be losing? There's tons of different ways to do it off site, like online backup. And if we're talking about your client and they're using Pro or Premier or not, the accountant edition of QuickBooks, there's an automatic data recovery. Those are other things that, to look into when it comes to that worst case scenarios. I can't get into my company file anymore within QuickBooks. And then just in general, there are ways to, affect your data performance, because again, if you just keep working inside of your QuickBooks desktop company file, it's just going to continually get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's not uncommon now. We've talked to clients or companies that have, I've been using it since 2000. I've got, data in there going all the way back to 1999. Do you really need all that? Right. So maybe every once in a while you want to optimize your company file. There are some preferences to set to optimize the performance of that. And then also reducing file size. One thing some people don't know is that when you make a backup, there is a TLG file. It's a transaction log file that will actually, that is a history of every transaction that you've made in your company file since the last time you made a backup. So if you never actually go through the process of file, make a backup, that transaction log file will continue to grow and be associated with your live QuickBooks company file until you actually do make a backup. So that transaction log file needs to be written to every time. So if that is abnormally huge, you can just, the easiest thing to do is just make a backup.
Well, right? And Dan, I might just point out there that a lot of our clients, they'll be like, oh, well, the system backs up the network every week or every night or whatever. We have automatic backups. That doesn't reset that TLG file. So some of these people have not done a backup from within QuickBooks for years. And you're right, that TLG file can be huge and that can impact the performance like you're talking about. So you need to inform your clients, even though your hard drive or your network might be backing up on a regular basis, within QuickBooks, at least, daily or weekly, at least weekly, you should be creating a backup from within QuickBooks to reset that TLG file, because a lot of clients just don't know that.
Right. It's definitely a difference between making a backup in QuickBooks and having a backup or a copy of your company file stored elsewhere. So good point there. And then there's the utility of condense. So this is sometimes, unbelievably, year end is coming up soon. I can't believe we were just saying before we got on here is it's already September. But this might be a year end type of activity. Take a look at your client's company file and maybe make a backup or a condense so that they're only working in active data that they need to look back on, the last couple of years or so. And then with performance is the system that it's on, the environment that it's in. You may need to optimize your network. So I provided a link there of how to. It's a very robust article that QuickBooks has created of resolving your desktop performance issues. And there's also a different article to optimize the network that it's on. So that's a great resource there for you for data performance. All right, so we're going to talk about preparing the file for QuickBooks conversion, but I have a poll question. So this, I've been sharing the results of the first poll question for forever. So what would you like to see in upcoming QB Power Hour webinars? Is it, practice management or some apps, more on QuickBooks Desktop, more on QuickBooks Online, maybe some point of sale, or if you have something else that you would prefer to show, answer that way, but then put it in the Q&A so that we can have a record of that, so we can run reports based on what you've entered in, so that we can see and provide to you what it is that you're looking for with these webinars. So appreciate that.
Okay, and Dan, I've gotten behind on the questions over here, but I have a hard
I'm
one.
captivating.
Here's a hard one for you. I have an issue in Enterprise 20, QBDBPF log file monitor service not running locally. I did a rebuild. I get an error trying to import feeds, and my existing account is not found. How can I fix? That's way above my pay grade.
Yeah, there's a lot more questions than answers in that statement. So we'd have to know what is the error that you're getting, and what is that? Is it only that file that's happening in? Does it happen with other clients on the same computer and the same machine? So we want to rule down.
Contact support. Yeah. They need contact support. Okay. Here's an easy one because I can't remember. Okay. When you create a portable company file and you restore the portable file, do the attachments stay attached? I think they do, but I wasn't positive.
The record of what they are attached to does, but the attachment itself, though, and this is true in a backup as well. So if you take a backup file or a portable file and put it in another location, those attachments don't go along for the journey. But they're in a folder. So you just copy that folder to the same location, and then there's a utility inside of QuickBooks to clean up those links to be able to reattach the link. So the connection of what file it's actually attached to, it comes along and it stays within the company file. But portable file and the portable file itself is to restore the financial impact of the company, not everything else that comes along with that. Sometimes there's a reason to make a backup. Sometimes there's a reason to make a portable file. But that is, hope that answers your question.
Okay. I think we need to move on, and then we'll do questions. Right. Yeah, because I want to make sure I get through this part too.
Yeah. So I stopped sharing, and then I'll share the results here. So while we're doing that, Michelle, if you want to start sharing your side of the presentation. But yeah, it looks like QuickBooks Online is about 50% as far as what we want to see more of.
Okay, are you seeing pre-conversion QB desktop? Whoops, I went too far. Are you seeing the slides, my slides?
Yes. Okay. Yes, they are shared.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, because we are running short on time, and this is covered in the advanced certification training materials. So you all, I assume, hopefully, you're a ProAdvisor. If you're not, you should be. It's free to join for QuickBooks Online ProAdvisor, and you can access the training materials for advanced certification. Even if you're not ready to work on the advanced test yet, you can access the training materials. Module 10 talks about complex conversions, but it talks about converting from desktop to online in depth. So I am going to go through this and focus on preparing that QuickBooks desktop file for conversion. So I'm going to skip through some of these. You do need to have QuickBooks desktop to initiate the conversion, and so you'll see that in there. Dan talked about this product information window. He mentioned the targets. Your total number of targets has to be less than 350,000. If they're not, you need to run the condense file. Also, if the file is on a network or if it's hosted by Right Networks or somebody, you need to bring that file down to a local drive, to your local C drive, to do the conversion. So a couple of things there, just to point out and be aware. You can see then down here, you've got some information on condensing that QuickBooks file. So what happens is, and I mentioned this, that a lot of times these clients have been using QuickBooks for a long time, a number of years, and they've got a really big data file. Just because they've got 15, 20 years of data in desktop doesn't mean you should convert 15 to 20 years of data to QuickBooks Online. So what I usually recommend is you convert just the last year or two of data. So you'll want to condense that data file. And I believe we got a slide on this somewhere. Didn't we have the condensed thing, Dan? I guess we didn't get that. Okay. when you condense the data, okay, so under File Utilities, Condense Data, when you go in, and there's article links down here where you can go in and read more details, what it does is it condenses all of those transactions. So it goes through and it summarizes all of your historical transactions. So let's say if I wanted to just convert 2020 and newer, so I can say condense as of 12/31/2019. It will take all of those historical transactions, it summarizes them into monthly or total journal entries, because remember, your beginning balances can't change. So it condenses all those individual transactions into summary journal entries, either monthly if you tell it to do it monthly, or one big one. So when you run this condense, you have to let it go. And I've heard a lot of people that will let it run Friday night. They'll tell it to start condensing this file, let it run all weekend. Because otherwise, you're tempted to look at it and it'll say not responding. And it's not responding because it's working. It's back there crunching and working and crunching and working. This can take hours and hours and days if it's a really big file, especially if you tell it to condense on a monthly basis. It's going to take a long time. So set it to condense on Friday. You can turn your monitor off, go home, and just let it go. If you get back in Monday and it's still going, let it go a few more days. And I can't remember, somebody once told me the longest it had ever taken to condense, and I can't remember, but it was amazingly a long time. But the other thing that you want to do when you go through that condense is one of the last screens in the condense wizard says clean up old unused names. So you can't delete a customer or a vendor or an account in desktop if there's a transaction associated with it. Even if you deleted it, sometimes you can't delete it. So anyway, any customer that you ever used, you can't delete them, or a vendor or an account or whatever. So when you condense the data and it summarizes all those transactions, now it removes those transactions. So now you can delete those old unused customers and vendors and accounts and things. So you want to make sure you tell it to clean up those lists. That's the other thing that I was mentioning. If your client is approaching those list limits, on accounts or customers or vendors or whatever, the condense feature can allow you to clean them up and get rid of a lot of those old unused names. You don't want to convert old and inactive things to QuickBooks Online, because then you can never really get rid of them. Okay, so you want to clean those things up prior to converting, and the condense feature will allow you to do that. You still have your historical desktop backup in the event of an audit or if they need that old information. Okay, so don't convert all of that stuff into QBO. Then Dan already talked about some of these things. On best practices, you need a healthy data file prior to conversion. If your desktop has a balance sheet out of balance and you convert to QBO, you can't fix it. It's just permanently jacked up. All right, so you need to make sure your desktop file is healthy based on all the stuff Dan just talked to you about. There's the details on how to convert and all that. You can convert either with inventory on or off, and the only thing I want to point out here is if you're using a third-party app, you might have been tracking inventory details in QuickBooks Desktop, but when you convert to QuickBooks Online, you may not use inventory feature in QuickBooks Online because you're using a third-party app. So you may convert with inventory off. When you do that, now it has to make a bunch of adjustments in the back end because you don't have inventory anymore. Your sales transactions and your purchase transactions that used items are going to be adjusted to now use accounts. All the details on what happens is in the advanced cert training materials, because we don't have time to go through all of those details. Just be aware, be careful if you're converting a desktop file that was using inventory to QuickBooks Online. Okay. The other thing to be aware of is desktop inventory was average cost, and QuickBooks Online inventory is FIFO. So there will be a difference, and you have a FIFO adjustment, and you have to notify the IRS. I think it's like Form 2115 or something like that, a change in accounting method. So be aware of that. And if you're the bookkeeper and you don't do the taxes, just make sure that you let them know. So just be aware of that thing there. Okay. So then the other thing is, let's say the desktop file is a disaster. They started using it 15, 20 years ago. Things weren't set up right, this, that, and the other. You may decide, you know what, I don't want to convert from desktop at all. But you don't want to start totally over. So what you can do is you can import lists. So like Dan was talking, the names list, the customers and the vendors, the chart of accounts, you can convert those things. You can convert the items or the products and services list. So what you can do is from desktop, you can import your list into QBO, then you can enter the beginning balances and the open transactions and all that. And I will tell you again, in the Advanced Cert Training Materials, Module 10 on complex conversions, it goes through step by step. I think there's like 13 or 15 steps, how to put in all these beginning balances and opening balances. You don't just go through and get the trial balance from desktop and enter all your beginning balances in QBO. For example, accounts receivable. If I just plug in a big number in accounts receivable as an opening journal entry, then when I receive a payment from a customer, I can't apply it to an open invoice. And I don't have an aging and stuff. So you want to enter all the open invoices, the open bills that you have, the outstanding checks and deposits. So in the Advanced Cert Training Materials, we've gone over and given you step by step how to do that. So what you might want to do is get those lists from desktop, and then we're going to import our lists into QBO and then put in our beginning balances and our open transactions following all those steps. Now, what I want to talk about on importing these lists is a couple of key things here, and I'm trying to keep an eye on my time here. You can download a sample file so that you get the lists in the right order, okay? So you'll want to put the sample file here so you get those lists in the right order. So you'll download that sample file, and that way you can see which order the columns need to be in and everything. So from QuickBooks Desktop, what you need to do, let me just go back up to these lists for a minute. So if you're going to do this from QuickBooks Desktop, you'll go in there and you'll go under File, Export, customer list. It will export your list to an IIF. That's like an Intuit interchange format. So export your list to an IIF file. Then open that list up in Excel. So when you go into Excel and you do File Open, it looks for Excel files first. Change that to look for all files. And now open that IIF file in Excel, and you'll see all these different columns. You can see inactive status, yes or no is what it'll show. You can sort by inactive or not. So if you've marked customers as inactive, now you'll be able to quickly see them in Excel and delete your inactive customers or vendors or accounts or items. Any of these lists, you can clean these lists up. So export your list from desktop, open it up in Excel, clean up that list, and then you can import that list into QBO. Now, it gets a little tricky though when we're talking about accounts, because in QBO we have detail type of accounts, and in QuickBooks Desktop we don't have detail accounts. So when you convert from QB Desktop to QBO, that conversion tool, it'll assign a detail type of account for you. If you're not using the conversion tool and you export the list of accounts from desktop, and now when I go to import it into QBO, I have to get it into, I have to get a detail count assigned to it. So, and here's a few, caveats about importing accounts, but when you go to import into QBO, I have to have a detail type of an account. So I would have to go through in Excel and assign a detail count on every one of that. And that's very cumbersome, especially if they have a couple of hundred accounts. It's going to take some time to go through to assign a detail account in Excel before you import it. So instead of doing that, here's what you can do. You export your chart of accounts from your desktop file. You can then open it up and clean it up in Excel to delete any old unused accounts and things like that. Then start a new desktop file, okay? File, new company, create a new desktop file, import the chart of accounts into QuickBooks Desktop, then do your conversion to QBO, because it will assign the detail accounts automatically for you from desktop with the conversion tool. Okay, so I know that's confusing, but it's one of those things though where it will save you time to actually create a new desktop file and then convert the desktop file to QBO. So I hope I didn't confuse you all with that. But honestly, though, the biggest thing when you're talking about converting to QBO is clean up any data integrity problems that Dan talked about previously. To clean up those data problems, make sure you don't have any of those problems, and condense the data so you don't have this huge company and all these old unused names and accounts and things like that. So Dan, I made it through that like 10 minutes.
Man, you were on a roll.
Well, yeah, and I want to tell you guys, make sure you go look at the advanced certification training materials when you're doing conversions, because there's so much good information out there, especially if you're converting a desktop file that has inventory. It helps you understand what's going on behind the scenes and things like that. We don't have time to go through all of that right here, but you can go watch the advanced training materials. You can download the supplemental guide, and those things are a great resource. And this, Karen says, wish I had seen that idea about importing the chart of accounts a couple of weeks ago. Great idea. Yeah, it's a good workaround, and that's why I like to share it with people.
Yeah, and we were kind of talking about this before. Another thing you can do is take those IAF files, because it's real easy just to export your IAF, export out of QuickBooks to IAF. Take all of your lists except payroll. You can't do that with payroll, but all of your lists, send them to the IAF file as one big thing, and then import those into a brand new company file. And then, because you don't have any transactions associated with those list elements, then you can delete them. And you can just go through Control D, Control D, Control D. You can even turn off the prompt, are you sure you want to do that? And then hold Control D, if you want to, and it'll just go through the whole list. So there's if you're more comfortable in QuickBooks, navigating and removing things out of QuickBooks, and Excel is not your bag, you can definitely do it that way. And then now you've got a clean company file. You've got your old file. You've still got the lists in the IAF format. So if something horribly went wrong in the new file, you could just start a new company, re-import those files again, and go from there. But then you don't have to worry about the detail type when you're bringing those into QuickBooks, because it does it for you automatically.
Yes, I love Automagic. Karen here, Karen's got a great comment. She says, I remember being told that condense is not a good idea. Has this changed? And yes, Karen, you've been using QuickBooks Desktop for years and years, like I have as well. I think back in 2006, when they changed the database in the background or whatever, I think that's when it changed. I could be wrong about the year, but at some point, the way the condense changed, the database structure changed, what they were using, like SQL or this or that, or some techie details, to where now condense does work. And it is a good idea to condense that data rather than importing all of it into QBO or converting all of it into QBO.
And I'm sure we could spend a whole hour on horror stories of what happens when it doesn't condense right. But the idea is that you have, with the condense, it's supposed to take a look at that date and consolidate what it can. Now, there are a variety of reasons that it can't, and that's one thing to look into when you're actually doing the condense. But the idea is that it's supposed to look prior to that date and just summarize everything up until that point. And then, as the accountant in the accountant edition, you can actually override that and say, hey, just delete everything outside of this date range. I'm going to worry about it when I get it up to QuickBooks, or I'm going to make my adjusting entries in desktop and then take that file up to QuickBooks Online.
But
there's online
remove
itself,
all transactions. Yeah, it's remove all, and that leaves those lists there for you. Yeah.
Right, or you can make a period copy, and that's ideally used for audits and things like that if you're needing to send the file to the IRS. But with QuickBooks, you can also do or with the condense, you can also do just removing the audit trail, just to remove maintain your file size as well. So that's a new feature in 2019. If you're not finding that you need to use the audit trail, well, as soon as you delete it, you'll need it, but but that's something that you can do in the cleanup as well. The condense is just remove the audit history out of there, and that takes up a lot of space as well.
Right. So, Dan, I think we should go ahead and do the last polling question because we are at the end. However, Dan, I can stay a few extra minutes if you can, because we had several questions here that we didn't get to. And Dan, I'd like to ask you some of the hard ones because you're smarter than I am.
Right.
You definitely know the techie things better than I do. So while that poll question's going, I'm going to go ahead and answer one of them from Elizabeth. She wants to talk about comparisons between QBO and QB Desktop for niches, like differences in using QBO for construction versus desktop contractor for constructions. And so when you're talking about the differences, because QBO now allows you, because that was one of the things I know a lot of job costing clients, whether it was construction or service firms that do job costing like architects or engineers or even party planners or event planners. So if you need a job costing, you used to try to keep the clients in desktop, but that's not true anymore because QBO now can do progress invoicing. QBO can now track and allocate the payroll to the jobs when you're using QBO payroll, so you can allocate the labor to the jobs now. And you also have the projects feature and stuff. So it's a lot different. And the other thing to keep in mind with QBO, with the hundreds and thousands of apps that are available out there, it can become super powerful for any industry and niche things out there, from plumbers or electricians that are going from one job to the next. There's apps for that to help them to know what the next job is that they should go to and things like that. So the differences between desktop and online aren't really that great anymore in a lot of ways. So I would encourage you to check that out. Let's see, Dan, here, is it true that payroll transactions don't condense?
Prior to, if it's in the current year, they will not condense, especially if you're, because you need that for the current year. There is a list, and something happened with our presentation. I had all sorts of resources. I'll try to forward those out as well. There's a list in the condense link that on Michelle's slides. It has a list of what will convert or what will condense, what won't convert or condense and summarize. But again, you can kind of override that with the deletion if you're using the accountant edition.
And one of the things to keep in mind is always back up before you condense. So because somebody says, if you condense, can you still pull it past reports? What if you got an IRS audit or something 3 or 4 years later? Yeah. Always back up the data file prior to doing a condense. I think it does it automatically.
Yeah,
but
it forces you.
Yeah, so you have that historical file where if you are audited 3 or 4 years later, you can open the backup created before the condense, so you have the detailed information that you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it will also archive the current company file, and it will rename it and call it archive copy. So you can always pop back into that company file in before it does anything. And you can't do the condense without passing the verification. So you have to have clean data in order to do the condense. And when you do the condense, it backs up and makes a archive copy of the company file as well. So there are those safeguards already in place when you are doing the condense. Any other questions that we still need to? Can we ask that one? Okay.
Let's see.
Since we asked for future power hours, there's a lot of questions in there, but they're not actual questions that we need to ask.
Right. So here's a question I would like to answer. Is there a way to do a trial run of a desktop conversion to QBO without signing up for a subscription? I'd like to do a test run to see what works and doesn't work, so I'm prepared for issues before it's too late to turn back. So Kim, I understand that you want to do a trial run to see if something's not going to work. But the thing of it is, let's say you convert and you do have any problems or issues, you can reconvert. Dan, in its 60 days that you have to reconvert. So let's say you did a conversion from desktop to QuickBooks Online and you were like, oh my gosh, the balance sheet out of balance because I forgot to do what Dan said to fix everything. You can reconvert from desktop to QBO and it overwrites everything in that subscription. So you can reconvert within the first 60 days. You can also purge data. There's a way you can purge data so you can start over if you need to as well. If you truly want to just practice, you can create a free QBO subscription. You get a free 30-day trial if you go through QuickBooks.com. Don't go through your QBOA and create a new subscription there. Go through QuickBooks.com and you can get a free 30-day trial there.
Yeah, and another option is if you're doing wholesale, you can create a wholesale client. It doesn't bill you until your wholesale billing date. So if your wholesale billing date is 5 days from now, you create that wholesale client. You've got 5 days to play around with it before it actually gets, charges you. If it's totally wrong, you can kick it out of your wholesale, none the wiser.
Okay, very good. Somebody else says you talked about having a period copy for the IRS. How do I get that? So this is in QB Desktop. When you go under File, Condense, you'll see the option to create a period copy. So if they're being audited for 2019, you might do it December 2018 through January 2020. The month before and the month after, the year under audit, so that's all you're giving the IRS. You guys can help me by sending feedback to Intuit for QuickBooks Online. I would like a period user for QuickBooks Online. So I would like a special user type that allows the IRS or whichever audit person to have read-only access for a specific period of time. So I would like a period user. So if you can send that feedback to Intuit, the more people that send it in, the more likely that is to happen.
Yeah, that's a good one because when you're sending those period copies, then now they've got their data, they can do whatever they want in that. So rather than accessing the live data, but only a certain period of time, that would be a good add.
Yeah, and then one final question here I definitely want to talk about. Do you think online should really win versus desktop? Are there times you recommend desktop over online, or is online basically the win now? I am a longtime desktop user. I started using desktop in the mid-90s. I started teaching desktop in 99, wrote books on desktop, co-authored the advanced cert on desktop, and all kinds of desktop stuff. I now am QBO only, and the thing of it is, anything desktop can do, you can do in QBO with third-party apps sometimes, and you have all the added benefits of QuickBooks Online, being in the cloud with the multi-user access. And honestly, now when I go back and work in desktop, it seems clunky and dated. You do need to learn how to navigate in QBO with multiple tabs open with tabbed browsing and keyboard shortcuts and icons or bookmarks to use your bookmark bar and things. All those things are very helpful. I work much faster in QBO now than I did in desktop, and that's hard to say because I was a huge desktop person for years. But yes, I think QBO is where it's at now. All right.
And if you do need desktop with hosting, you can have the best of both worlds. And then if what you want is all in desktop or in QuickBooks, then sometimes desktop will have the nod to that. But but it could get more pricier in desktop if you need all that. But of course, if you need the apps in QuickBooks Online, then it could be pricier as well. So it really just depends. Some of these, you don't have to deal with desktop data damage in online. So if that is something that is habitually coming up, we just didn't have those data issues in online with QuickBooks Online.
Right. Okay.
All right.
So one more here that I would like to address.
Oh.
I'm sorry. This is one of my hot topics here. Somebody says, I agree, but I have a client who doesn't want to pay for software monthly. He wants to buy it once or at least every couple of years. So this is where I understand some of these clients just have a general, I don't want to pay for it monthly. Okay, build that into your fees. For $25 a month or whatever, you can build that into your fees so the client isn't paying for it every month. You can provide it to them as part of your monthly services. So client, for $1,000 a month, we're going to use QBO because it saves you so much time compared to desktop. It's well worth it. So a lot of accounting professionals now are building it into the fees so the client doesn't give you the pushback on, I don't want to do this. The benefits far outweigh the cost. By being cloud-based and everybody having access and all that stuff. So, sorry, that was my last one there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the win goes to QBO with nothing to download, nothing to install, nothing to save, nothing. You're getting yourself started and hitting the ground running with QuickBooks Online, far on top of over the top of desktop. You got to download it, you got to set it up. Multiple people, you're going to install at multiple locations and make sure it's hosting properly. There's a whole sorts of Windows issues that can get in the way of that. With QuickBooks Online, if you can log in, you're there.
Yep.
You don't have those problems.
All right. Well, we did not get to all of your questions because there's lots and lots of you with lots of great questions. But Dan and I, we want to be respectful of your time and everything, and we can continue the conversation and the questions on Facebook. So join us at the Facebook group. We'd love to see you out there. And make sure that you join us for the next one 2 weeks from now. We'll post the time. Dan and I are working on the new schedule, so we'll get that updated and posted out there for you soon. So thank you all very, very much. We appreciate you joining us today. Dan, thanks as always.
All right, and we'll see you next time on the Power Hour.
Bye, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed listening to the QB Power Hour podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in our Facebook group. You can find those resources and much more at qbpowerhour.com.